Mr. Aneja, let me come over to you first. I mean, India has now, as we know, chosen to boycott the One Belt, One Road initiative. What do you make of this? What are your thoughts on this? I mean, what sort of message do you think India is trying to send to China and its neighbors?
Well, the reason why India is not participating is because of sovereignty issues, because part of the CPEC is passing through what is the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So India is citing sovereignty grounds and sending an important signal to the Chinese that connectivity cannot precede the issue of sovereignty. But having said that, I mean, there are other countries like Vietnam, for example, which has a serious maritime dispute with the Chinese in the South China Sea. And you have Japan, which has a dispute with China over the Senkaku Islands. Now, those are also sovereignty disputes, but both these countries have decided to send a delegation. I think India went a little overboard in reinforcing its objections by boycotting the forum, while the rest of most countries in the rest of the world have agreed to participate, including the United States.
Right. Mr. Soran, let me come over to you now. Does CPEC, combined with Beijing's growing presence and influence in the South Asian region, raise all sorts of red flags for New Delhi? I mean, after all, OBOR would massively strengthen China's economic, political and security influence in India's neighborhood. And of course, India cannot afford to play second fiddle to Beijing either. And even if it decides to join OBOR, it cannot afford to be a junior partner. So India does face quite the dilemma here. What are your thoughts on this, sir?
I think I agree with you that the dilemma that India has is our limitation to overcome our sense of playing second fiddle. In international relations, when relations have asymmetry of power, they are not necessarily strong and weak relationships. One has to calibrate that relationship such that we can still pursue our national interests. Surprise, surprise. India is not being as conspicuous by its absence in Beijing today. We have good company, Bhutan and Balochistan. These are other two criticizing the BRF, which is forum. And I think, as Atul said, we definitely have gone overboard. But I also want to underline simultaneously, we are not completely out of OBOR. We are partially in it. We are in BCIM Economic Corridor, which is part of BRI also. We are part of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank of China. We are part of New Development Bank. We are going to be part of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. These are all agencies and organizations that support and will finance BRI. So we are quite on board with BRI, except that on this particular forum meeting, we have decided to underline the fact that we are quite sensitive on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor crossing through Baltistan and of course Azad Kashmir and Gilgit. And we want to underline that issue of sovereignty. Not every nation is doing the same thing. I'm sure we calculated our behavior and our response. Apparently, I fail to understand the logic of what are the cost-benefit analysis here. And we are definitely part of BRI, even if we are not going to Beijing this time. Hopefully, I will not, I'm not anticipating Prime Minister not joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization next month, because Shanghai Cooperation Organization endorses BRI. So we are partially on board, except that for this particular conference, we have decided not to go there and underline and emphasize. But believe me, international media is not missing us at all.
Right, so do stay with us. Ramesh, let me quickly come over to you. I mean, to some extent, Ramesh, one can understand, India's reluctance to participate in OBOR. I mean, because let's say, even hypothetically, let's say if India does join it, it somewhat gives the India, a de facto, at least it gives Pakistan a de facto legitimization of the CPEC project. And it also legitimizes, to some extent, the so-called rights that Pakistan says it has over Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. What are your thoughts on this, Ramesh?
Indeed, Sahil. Now, just to take off from the point where Atul and Professor Singh left. Now, before I come to your point, Sahil, I just want to quote what President Xi Jinping said earlier this morning in his opening address to the Belt and Road Forum. And I quote him, he says, "All countries should respect each other's sovereignty, dignity and territorial integrity, each other's development paths and social systems, and each other's core interests and major concerns," unquote. Now, I fail to understand how that squares with the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC, which runs through a territory which India considers or sees as its own sovereign territory. So clearly, there are inbuilt contradictions, built into the Chinese argument insofar as the Belt and Road Initiative is concerned, and including the CPEC, which it calls as a core component or element of the broader or the larger BRI. Now, that said, India has consistently maintained the position, including late last night, India time, when it issued a statement from the Foreign Ministry saying that India has serious sovereignty concerns and issues concerning sovereignty, and one of the reasons why India chose to stay away from the Belt and Road Forum. Clearly, India is signaling its intent to stay away from these such policies going forward, but that remains to be seen how India chooses to calibrate its position going forward, given the asymmetry which is built into the India-China relationship. Sahil?
Okay, Ramesh. Now, Mr. Oneja, let me come back to you again. Do you think India could be isolating itself in the region by not joining One Belt, One Road? I mean, after all, most of India's neighbors have joined the initiative. So could this not in the long run hamper India's credentials?
You see, I go with what Swaran said, that India is not really out of the OBOR, One Belt, One Road. Though India has not formally supported OBOR, but India is part of projects under the OBOR. So de facto, we are very much within the OBOR framework, though we do not like to use the word. For example, the BCIM corridor, and of course, the membership of AIIB, and actually even the new development bank, which is the BRICS Bank, also funding projects under this large scheme. So as of now, we are not out of the OBOR, but now it remains to be seen what is the step forward from here, from the Indian side. Because if we see the Pakistani media reports, there is the development of this North Indus River cascade, which is again passing through Gilgit-Baltistan. If that is to be believed, then there's going to be investment of about $50 billion to harness 40,000 megawatts of power, which is a complete game changer as far as Pakistan's energy security is concerned. So will India harden its stand from here and actually take steps which would infringe OBOR, which it has not done so far? We'll wait and see for that.
Right. Okay. We are also now joined by former diplomat Ashok K. Kantha. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on WION. One of the most recent developments, as we know, is that India has boycotted the One Belt, One Road initiative. Our guests on the panel are saying that they might have refused to join, but they're still not out of it. But what do you make of India's boycotting of the OBOR forum, sir?
No, I don't want to use the language of boycott. There was an invitation to India to attend, certain activities linked to Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. We have decided not to attend, and I understand we have very valid reasons for not doing that. As other participants just mentioned, there's this question of Belt and Road Initiative putting China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, its flagship project, and CPEC passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So there are very valid sovereignty-related concerns we have that China should fully understand as a country which is acutely conscious of its own sovereignty, which projects its territorial claims, both contested and imagined at times as core interests.
Right. Also, Mr. Sora, now let me come over to you. Now, as Indians, we are all for national sovereignty, but looking through the lens of economics is also important. By deciding not to join the One Belt, One Road, is India not losing out on major trade opportunities, despite saying that we are completely not out of it, but even, giving the notion that we're not interested, are we not losing out on economic opportunities here?
We're surely going to lose on several opportunities. There is no doubt it is a Chinese vision. I wouldn't call it even a project. It's a forum. By joining it, we don't become members and we don't endorse whatever OBOR stands for. It's a discussion forum. We have joined several discussion forums at track 2 level, track 3 level on Kashmir, which is more sensitive to us. We will definitely be losing out if we want to sort of play a separate tune. I heard ministry spokesperson yesterday saying we also are building our own connectivity. For example, we are building connectivity in the west through Iran's Chabahar port. We are also doing, transport agreement with Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal. We are doing the trilateral highway in the east. No doubt we are doing several things on our own, but a grand vision which Xi Jinping has outlined will first of all need several partners. India definitely can stand up and be an important partner. Relationship will be asymmetric. We will not be equal to China in that sense, but that does not automatically mean that we are weak compared to China, that we endorse everything that China talks about. In fact, all those who are today in Beijing are not necessarily endorsing everything that Chinese are saying and doing. So I don't understand. Yes, we can multiply our advantages if we are able to collaborate with the Chinese in areas that selectively suit us and ask questions and stay away from areas where we don't think we need to enter and cooperate. It's a discussion forum, first of all. That is how it is being projected. And last point very quickly, Chinese had built their first important infrastructure in the same region, Gilgit-Baltistan, in late 1950s. It's called Karakoram Highway. I don't see India avoiding Chinese in any multilateral or bilateral forums just because they built an infrastructure project in that region. Today, we are far more sensitive about this, another project. I'm sure there is some wisdom behind it. Apparently, in people, someone like me does not understand it as of now.
Right. Ramesh, now let me quickly come over to you. Critics of the One Belt, One Road initiative have said that, it lacks a lot of transparency in its working and the process is not participatory and collaborative in nature. I mean, do you think this forum will finally address those concerns?
Now, Sahil, the crux of the debate is as follows. Is India better off being within the tent, as it were, or remain outside of it? Now, it's a moot point, as commentators on our discussion have just now pointed out. It's a divided issue. It's a moot point whether India is better off becoming a collaborator, as it were, in the OBOR initiative, or to stay away from it. Now, that said, this narrative that the OBOR reflects or represents China's openness and belief in multilateralism, I think is a bit specious and a bit rich, because very recently we saw China do just the opposite on the issue of South China Sea, in spite of the Hague verdict going against it. So clearly, the narrative is skewed because China's policies is not consistent vis-a-vis India on the one hand, on the issue of its relations with other countries in the region. So clearly, there are contradictions. But that said, on balance, India has decided in its wisdom, as one of the commentators said before me, that it is better off for India to stay out of the OBOR or the Belt and Road Forum for now, in spite of the fact that India has reached out to China and collaborated with it on other corridors, including the BCIM and other projects of value of significance to India. But the point remains, the concerns and the arguments against OBOR is because some in India feel that the Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to revive the ancient Silk Route, has strategic component or strategic value to it. It's not just couched in infrastructure development, ports, airports, railways, trade and free trade areas. There is a strategic component to it which India sees as inimical to its interests, especially manifesting itself in the CPEC. So clearly, India's concerns are out there. It remains to be seen how China chooses to respond. Remember, Sahil, the Foreign Ministry statement said that India is waiting for China to get back to India on its concerns and to devise a way forward. So clearly, India putting the ball in China's court. It remains to be seen how China chooses to respond to India's rebuff, as it were, by staying out of the Belt and Road Forum. Sahil?
Right. Mr. Kant, I'm coming over to you now, and my colleague Ramesh has made some very valid points there. He's saying that, it's not just the economic significance. There are other factors that we need to take into consideration. And now, would you agree when I say that India also can't ignore the symbolic significance, as, it was along the Silk Route that Indian trade and philosophy traveled to the rest of Asia? So, I mean, then that being said, that concern that China may gain cultural influence in the region may prove counterproductive to India.
I'm losing your voice.
Sir, I said there is this symbolic significance when it comes to the Silk Route, because this was where the Indian trade and philosophy traveled to the rest of Asia. So my question is, considering that, isn't there a concern that China may gain somewhat more cultural influence in the region, which may prove counterproductive to India?
No, that's a small part of considerations we have. I think, as Ramesh pointed out, you have to look at the nature of Belt Road Initiative. You have to look at the fact that CPEC passes through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, but we have other misgivings about strategic dimensions of CPEC. There's very little economic justification from China's perspective for putting in that kind of money in CPEC. So clearly, the rationale has more to do with its strategic objectives, including those linked to Gwadar Port, upgraded Karakoram Highway, doubling of strategic investment in Pakistan, so to say. All these have very direct bearing on India's national security environment that we cannot ignore. That's one. Second aspect, we have to look at, BRI is a Chinese initiative. It's not a multilateral initiative. Must understand it clearly. We have offered to discuss it with the Chinese friends. This offer was made when I was ambassador in China. We have raised a number of issues and concerns about BRI with China, about CPEC, which is the most advanced component and flagship project of BRI with the Chinese. Unfortunately, we haven't received a response to those issues we have raised. This offer was reiterated yesterday in MEA spokesperson's remarks. Third aspect we need to consider is that looking beyond CPEC, BRI is not just about connectivity. No, it has a very important geostrategic dimension. In our neighborhood, Maritime Silk Road, for instance, commentators have rightly pointed out that one objective of Maritime Silk Road, through entrenched and long-term presence of Chinese entities at ports in our vicinity, is to reinforce China's position as a maritime power, whether in South China Sea or Indian Ocean. All this must be considered when we respond to BRI. But point I would like to make here is that we are not closing the door when it comes to cooperation with China. We are quite prepared to look at synergies in interests of two countries. This pragmatic approach resulted in India responding positively to the initiative on Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. As you know, it was developed as a multilateral financial institution, and India is now the second largest stakeholder in AIIB, next only to China. If we approach future opportunities on both sides in a similar, open-minded, pragmatic way, I don't see why we cannot come up with areas and projects where we can work together. So it's a question of not looking at labeling of projects as under BRI, but looking at concrete openings for working together, which is definitely feasible. So I don't see how we are being boxed out of opportunities of cooperation just because we have decided not to endorse BRI or not to participate in a conference.
Right. Okay, sir, we are now running out of time. So I'm just going to quickly come to all of you and just ask for your closing comments on this issue. When it comes to One Belt, One Road, should we fight or work together with China? Mr. Oneja, let's start with you, please.
Oh, I see plenty of opportunities for us. As a confederate nation, we have to look at the possibilities of collaboration here while keeping our powder dry. So it has to be a dual approach. Look at the opportunities and exploit them to the full so long as they serve India's interest. For example, healthcare sector is going to open up big time now if the OBOR projects continue. Smart cities are opening up. There are great opportunities for Indian healthcare industry and IT companies. Just because it is an OBOR project doesn't mean that we close our eyes to it. I think we should look for in a positive spirit of engagement while being cautious about real politics which is involved.
Right, okay. Mr. Singh, is OBOR a threat or an opportunity for India? Your closing remarks, sir.
I think Ambassador Kanta has put it very nicely. Several of his senior colleagues are in media writing about the same thing. We have to be selective in choosing where we can engage. We don't have to oppose it. And the fact that we are already in it to a large extent, we are only going to be absent from this one particular conference. And this is a formulation which perhaps better represents India's approach to BRI or OBOR than the way it is being formulated in the press as we see it right now, saying that we are not going to participate in OBOR in total. This is not the reality. And Ambassador Kanta just mentioned that this is not the reality. So I assume that we will be absenting only from this conference. Maybe we will be joining the next conference, whenever they call it next year or earlier. And therefore, I don't see that several other components, including as early as last month, we revived our consultations in Kolkata on BCIM economic corridor. So we will continue to be engaged in several other organizations and agencies of OBOR. And I think even these conferences, we might be on board sooner than later.
Right. Ramesh, your final thoughts?
Sahil, on balance, I guess India should adopt a policy of wait and watch, of cautious optimism. But one point, by way of additional information, Sahil, what this debate reinforces for me, at least to my mind, is the absence of what is known as a strategic culture in the Indian media, in the Indian discourse. Now, just to cite an example, China is using high-speed railway to extend all the way from Yiwu in China to Madrid in Spain and onwards to London, connecting Asian mainland with Europe. And here in India, we're still debating whether India needs the bullet train or not. So clearly, there is a disconnect, and it's high time India got its act together. Sahil?
Okay, Mr. Kant, I'm quickly coming over to you, and we are, of course, running out of time. So in about 10 seconds, if you had to sum up the OBOR forum and the OBOR, the future of OBOR in India, how would you see it?
What I'll suggest that, given our legitimate concerns about BRI, including CPEC, it will be unrealistic for China to expect us to endorse. They should address our concerns. In the meantime, we should see where our respective developmental agendas, connectivity agendas converge, and we should work together on projects and opportunities where we have shared interests.
Okay, we leave it there for now, but I would like to thank everyone on this panel for their time and their perspective. We leave things there for now, and we'll see what OBOR and it means, what OBOR actually means for India's future, and what will happen from here next. There's, of course, another day left of that forum. And with that, we're going to take a very short break, but more news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned.